Okay, let's get started here. Those of you who have joined on time, appreciate it. Thank you. And some more people may be joining soon. So if you have joined this program or this type of webinar series earlier, you'll know that we've already done a couple of them. This is the third one in our series. And this is going to be about what we're calling the other Ivy League. Okay. So let me go ahead and turn on my video also for whatever good it might do. And what we're going to cover today is, as I mentioned, a lot of people, not just Indians, a lot of people around the world seem to have some kind of fascination for big name schools, right? So the Ivy League, it's every so often, in fact, not so uncommon at all for people to walk in and talk about, an Ivy League admission, right? So it's kind of has its own branding and all that, but the whole idea of this particular webinar is to dispel that myth that Ivy Leagues are the only way to go. I mean, Ivy League schools, I should say, are the only way to go, or there is some huge advantage to doing that, etc. So we're going to bust that myth here today. That is the objective. Okay. So let's get going here. Now, I want to start off with, as always, let me put this in slideshow mode. Right. So these are the college admissions criteria. And you have seen this before if you've attended any of the webinars earlier. So just for those who haven't, and if this is your first time, right? So the academics are still your number one criterion. Okay, we kind of threw in advanced placement tests in them, and then sometimes kids do take college level courses, which kind of count toward that academic profile. Okay, after that we have your SAT, and then this NMSQT. If you're not a US citizen, don't worry about it. If you are, then this is a test you take in 11th grade that might qualify you for a scholarship. It's like a PSAT. In fact, it is PSAT that's done in 11th grade. And then some people do Olympiads. It's not required, but some kind of contest like an Olympiad. Okay. And then research, internships, paid jobs, they always add to your profile. And then the most important category is the leadership and empathy is what we call it. So everything that you do outside the classroom falls into this category, whether it's community service or showing passion for a particular subject or a discipline or showing compassion, anything that you do, leadership, as I mentioned earlier. Okay, so all these fall into this category, and then eventually, how well you articulate what you have done here, how well you articulate them in your essays is what makes a big difference. Okay, regardless of what colleges we're talking about, whether it's the Ivies or not, any of the top schools or even mid-tier schools, the criteria are okay. And this should be familiar to most of you if you have been to Uwezo webinars earlier. If you've not, all we're saying here is that what colleges want is something or somebody, some application that stands out. Okay, clearly you have a bunch of white cards and now we have one red card, so that's what they're looking for. Just an analogy, to give you an idea, right? This is what they're looking for. Okay, so please make a note of any questions you might have because most likely I'll be able to answer those through the presentation. If not, I do have time. I will make time at the end of the overall presentation for you to ask any questions. Okay, all right, so those two are just like a backdrop to anything that we do in terms of college admissions. So now let's move on to today's webinar. Okay, so what we'll discuss is the Ivy League itself, right? So what is it, how it came about? Not going to spend too much time. Most of you may already be familiar, and then we'll talk about why Ivies are not the only option, and then the star of today's show, if you will, is what are called liberal arts colleges. Even though that's a misnomer, I'll talk about that more, but that term kind of stuck. They're called liberal arts colleges. And what are the traits? What are the characteristics of a liberal arts college? And then, of course, once we cover that, then we'll have to obviously kind of give you some perspective on how do you decide what type of college to choose. Okay. And then, of course, how Uwezo helps people do that, choosing the college and the rest of it. Okay. And then, of course, as I mentioned, we will have time for you to ask any questions. All right. Let's move on to the Ivy League, right? There's 8 schools. All of them are in the Northeast. In fact, they are bound by geography also. They have to be in the Northeast. They are in the Northeast, right? And then historically, they're very old universities. Okay, the oldest of them is Harvard, which was founded in 1636. But they all have some kind of aura about them, right? So it's kind of like the Mercedes of 20, 30 years ago, right? So there is some attraction and people still that they would prefer an Ivy League education. Okay, so that's still there. Now, that's not the only way to go about it, right? So, I don't know exactly what happened with the bullets here, but anyway, so for the Ivy Leagues, right, they're very rich, they have huge endowments, very selective, and very closed, right? I mean, not all of them, but if you followed any of the news in the last several months, you know that there have been lawsuits against some of these Ivy League colleges, etc., for being, partial toward alumni, their children, etc., or people that give funding and all that kind of stuff. Okay, so they are kind of closed and they're like an elite school, many of them, right? Now some of them may be losing their sheen, at least in my opinion, right? Because as technology becomes more and more common, right, it's available, accessible to everybody. Education is accessible to everybody. In fact, a lot of the Ivy League schools, you have probably heard the term MOOC, right? They're making those lectures and classrooms available in complete, in full, right? So as that happens, then people are seeing less of a need to actually attend those elite schools. Okay. Now they're not the only game in town, right? As I mentioned, increasingly they're becoming less and less. Again, this is probably my own opinion or Uwezo's opinion, but I think it's true. I mean, you do have Stanford University, which has, none of the Ivy Leagues have such a small or a low, acceptance rate. So Stanford is at 4%. And then there are other good schools, right, which are not in the Ivy League. They're like Duke, Rice. I've only listed a few. MIT, Caltech, and you guys have heard of all of these, I'm sure. Chicago, UC Berkeley, NYU, just to name a few. Okay, these are the bigger ones. And then there are consortia of colleges. Okay, and we'll talk about this a little bit more. There is the Claremont Colleges, that's a consortium of 5 universities or colleges, I should say, and people can take courses across the colleges, right, for credit. So one of them is called Harvey Mudd, which is a liberal arts college, and we'll talk about what a liberal arts college means. But 50% of the admits there do technology oriented majors, for example, computer science, engineering, etc. Okay, but it's called a liberal arts college. And then there is another term called the 5 colleges. This is in and around Boston. The big university there is the University of Massachusetts at Amherst, but you have some other schools there also, including Amherst College, which is one of the top schools, a liberal arts college, right? And then there is one college there called Smith, which is actually a women's only college. Okay, so these options are there also. And then there are certain colleges, and this is important for you guys to know, which have like built-in co-op program. So everybody that gets into college here does a co-op program. Okay, huge advantage because anywhere between 30% to 80% of the time of the graduates that go through the co-op program at these universities end up with an employment offer, job offer right after graduation. Now, not every college can say that. Now, just listed some of them here. Northeastern is one, Drexler is another one, Georgia Tech is also another one. Okay, so something to keep in mind because you could go to a top university and end up without a job after you graduate, or go to one of these universities where you do have a co-op program that's built into the curriculum and then end up with a job right afterwards. Okay, so something to keep in mind. All right, moving along. Now, the other Ivy League, right? This is the whole crux of the presentation here. This is the liberal arts colleges. Remember, I told you that these are called liberal arts colleges because initially, when all these, the Ivy Leagues, whether it's Harvard or even non-Ivy Leagues, did not allow women to go to college, right? We're talking in the 17th century or early 18th century, whatever, right? So what happened was the women, or may not be started with by women, but colleges started to spring up where only women got to go there. And obviously, in those days, right? So, what did they focus on? They focused on history, literature, arts, drama, and things like that. Hence the name liberal arts colleges. Okay. Of course, I just said that. Now, over time, though, a lot of these LACs, liberal arts colleges, started offering most of the majors big colleges do, right? Including computer science and engineering, economics, and everything else as well. Okay. So that's very important for you to know as an option for you to have. Okay. So it's interesting that some of the colleges, there is one called Williams College, along with, as I mentioned, Amherst College is another one, both on the East Coast and on the West Coast. You have a university or a college called Pomona, which is again a liberal arts college. And then I just mentioned Harvey Mudd before, which is more of a technology driven liberal arts college. Okay. So what has happened is because of the liberal arts or liberal education, these liberal arts colleges were offering, many of the top universities, including the Ivy, started saying we're also offering a liberal education. Okay. I gave you one example here. Columbia has something called the core curriculum. So everybody, regardless of the major, has to take a set of courses which don't always, in fact, often don't have to do with your major. Okay, the idea there is everybody goes through this. So you're sitting next to somebody who's a music major or somebody else who's an economics major, and you yourself might be an engineering major. Okay, the idea there is you go cross learning and cross, exchange of information, etc. So Columbia has actually adopted that, and that came from the liberal arts colleges where it's actually not an option, but that's the way things work there by default. Okay. Now, some of the popular or well-known liberal arts colleges, there are many, 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 by the way, okay, at least 30 or more, which are really, really good. And they compete with some of the top universities with the big name, okay? As I started off when I said earlier, outside of the US, these are not very popular. They're not very well known. But inside the US, they're very well known. Their acceptance rates are also, again, in single digits, right? So it's difficult to get in. It's not like a cakewalk at all, okay? I mentioned Williamson Amherst. Amherst, as I already told you, is part of a consortium with four other universities or colleges. One of them is a university, Massachusetts. Okay, Harvey Mudd, I mentioned, more than 50% STEM enrollment. It's also part of a consortium. It's called the Claremont Consortium. Okay, there are a number of colleges there where you can take courses within that system and then get credit for it, right? So you have the best of both worlds. So if you're at Harvey Mudd, take the STEM courses, but then maybe a couple of courses or classes you want to take in one of the other colleges, which is now offered here. More power to you. You can do that. Okay, that's one of the advantages the liberal arts curriculum offers you. Many of them have computer science and engineering, as I mentioned earlier, right? But they also have subjects or classes like peace and conflict studies, right? This may or may not be available at other non-liberal arts colleges, right? But the whole idea of a liberal arts college education is that you do have a concentration, you do have a major, but you do also have an opportunity to take courses which are not generally considered part of your curriculum. Okay, you have a chance to explore and take courses like this, or Russian or Chinese. Not to say that the bigger universities don't have it, but these guys make it a point to make it easier for you to actually explore other interests before you decide, do you want to go to a smaller college or a big college? Okay. And believe it or not, small colleges, the liberal arts college, for the sake of, I mean, that name stuck, right? So they do offer a lot more majors, as I mentioned already. But for the sake of continuity or consistency, let's still call them liberal arts colleges, right? They do have large endowments. Okay, so we're talking 2, 3, 4 billion dollars is what they have. They offer the same kinds of scholarship. Some of them, are obviously merit based. Some of them are need based scholarships, etc. So they have the same type of money to spend as the bigger universities do. Okay, something to keep in mind again. All right, let's move on. Now, what defines a liberal arts college? In other words, what is a liberal arts college? What makes one a liberal arts college? You may have some idea already, but I wanted to capture some of the key components of a liberal arts college here. Class size, generally very small. Okay, now overall strength of the college itself is going to be, in fact, I said 2,000, but there are colleges with 1,500 strength of a student body. Very small. That's probably smaller than some of the schools that you guys are going to, like Oak Ridge, Chirac, etc. Right? So small college, but they will have 100 acres, 200 acres, whatever, right? And large endowments, as I told you, right? And the class sizes tend to be very small. Okay. So in freshman and sophomore years, generally for large universities like a Boston University or Northeastern or UC Berkeley, any of the state colleges also, the freshman classes are generally in the 4 to 500 student range. Okay. Whereas here, that very number, the same type of class, may be 50, right? And then, they boast an average class size of like 8 or 6, right? Some of them may go to 12, 13, etc. But they have a very small class size, which may be important to some people, right? And majority of classes, 90% or more, are taught by professors and not teaching assistants. Again, very important in very large universities, especially state schools or even non-state schools, private schools. Private, when I say school, I mean a university. Many times, remember I told you the 400, 500 students in one lecture hall. Then they break up that 4 to 500, into maybe, let's say, 10 or 40 students each. And those smaller classes are actually taught by teaching assistants, meaning PhD students or students pursuing a master's curriculum. Okay, they're not taught by professors. Whereas in a liberal arts college, all the classes, at least 90% of them, are taught by professors, meaning they have a PhD in their respective fields. And many of them have PhDs from many of those bigger universities that we mostly know about. Okay, so that's also a point in favor of liberal arts colleges. And the college is close knit because obviously, small student body, you get to know people. In a class of 10 or 15 people, of course it's easy for you to get to know the professor and vice versa, get recommendation letters and get time with them, right? Many times what happens in big universities is, even if you have questions or you want to get time with the TA or professor, they have like maybe 1 or 2 hours per week, because the priority for the professor is research and priority for the teaching assistants is to help the professor do research so that they also get credit for it. So teaching is not on the top of their list, top of their minds, but unfortunately that's the case. Okay, whereas here you do get access to professors or other advisors, etc., much more easily. Okay, so you do have to declare a major. I said that before, but you have an opportunity. In fact, you're required more or less to take other subjects. But on top of that, you can choose to explore a few others which are not even required for your major, right? Before you decide where you want to focus your time while you're in college. Okay. And the emphasis for these liberal arts colleges is primarily in undergraduate programs. Okay. most of them, not all of them, most of them do not even have a graduate program. Okay, so this is good in the sense, entire focus is on you as an undergraduate. You do get opportunities to research with the professors, again, small classrooms, more access, etc. Right? And many of these smaller colleges also have tie-ins or tie-ups with industries around them. So you do get an opportunity to do research and get practical experience. Okay. So extracurricular activities, of course, again, they have all the facilities, but the number of students is small, right? And leadership type activities or anything that you want to do, stand out, start a club, or if you want to participate in a club that's already there, kind of like your high school, right? So it really does make a difference in terms of the size and the way the subjects are taught and the options you have. Okay. And I said this before also, right? So guidance counselors, in terms of your academic counselor, career counselor, you do have easier access to them because of the small size of the student body. Now, there's another option I wanted to throw out there. It's called open curriculum colleges. Okay, here you do kind of declare a concentration, but you have a lot more room to explore. Okay, this is good option for most. I would say for those students who are not really sure, right? They have several interests. So this is the type of curriculum you could explore, and there's a few colleges I've listed here, right? So they don't really have any core requirements. Now, remember, I talked about Columbia, where they have a core curriculum that everybody must do. Even otherwise, in liberal arts colleges, when you choose a major, you do have to do certain things. It's not completely up to you. Okay, you do have to do certain things if you choose economics. You do have to do a certain set of courses if you do computer science, etc. Okay. So the open curriculum doesn't really have any core requirements, right? Now you do declare a major, but easy, much more easy to explore others, meaning other options, right? So I call it BYOM, build your own major, more or less. But you do have to declare your intent, talk to counselors, get guidance, and then you kind of building your own major and you have a lot of options in terms of what you want to study. Okay, this is good for those people who have several interests and they don't want to restrict themselves to just one concentration or one major. Okay, some of the colleges that do this: Amherst, Hamilton, Smith, these are all liberal arts colleges. Brown is technically not, but it's a very small school, 7,000, but it's well known Ivy League school. NYU has something called the Gallatin School of Individualistic Studies, right? So there also you get to choose from a variety of courses. While you're taking courses in that college, the Gallatin School, you do get to take courses from the other colleges within the NYU. Okay, so that is just another option for people who are interested to explore. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so now, of course, we've learned. I mean, obviously, I didn't spend too much time on the well-known colleges because most of you know about them, and we did do a seminar. The very first one was about college admissions and all that. So we focused a lot in that session in terms of what are the big colleges. Again, go from West Coast to East Coast: Berkeley, UCLA, San Diego, to New York and UT Austin, Rice, etc. in the middle. Right, these are all well-known universities that have huge presence. If you notice, a lot of these small colleges don't really travel internationally, at least. It is really for a particular kind of education that you go there. Okay, so what is the right college for you? Well, I mean, you have options, right? The usual suspects, which are the big college, large campus, right? Urban setting, big city, a lot of things to do, not only on campus, but around campus, right? They're set in an urban setting, right? So as I said, the big cities, etc. They're usually big into sport teams, right? And parades, etc. So a lot of the big names, not to go into details, but they have, uh, they call him NCAA, right? National College Athletics Association. So they have tier one, tier two, tier three. So like something like a Boston University or Harvard, etc., Michigan, they're all in the tier one, right? So if you're a huge sports fan, it makes such a big difference to you that you want to not really participate. You're going to be watching, unless you're so good, you're going to play for the university, which I doubt. It happens very, very rarely, right? But whether it's basketball or American football, American baseball, whatever, right? So these have big sports teams. They do a lot of parades, they do a lot of parties and all that. So that's also part of the experience, right? So small colleges don't offer that. They don't even have sports teams. Okay. Very large class size. I touched on this earlier, especially the first year or the first 2 years. You're mostly on your own. Okay, in the sense that, as I told you earlier, very difficult to get time with professors or the teaching assistants. You have to rely on the internet. Fortunately for you, these days there's a lot of data, information that you can find just about anything. You can sometimes depend on each other as students, but some of these top universities are dog eat dog, meaning a student will look at you sometimes as competition, right? So he or she, even though they can help you, they have the answer, they may or may not actually give you the answer. So that's something that requires a lot of, you have to be a tough cookie, right? So some of the universities are really well known for that. There is grade uh, inflation you've heard of, there is grade deflation also. So if everybody does well, then they actually take everybody's grade down. Okay, so these are some intricacies that you don't really have to worry about right now. If you're curious, you can talk to Uwezo, will tell you more, but that is an issue that you must take into account. The class size is very, very large. Now, what about the other smaller colleges? So liberal arts colleges are not the only small colleges, right? There are other small colleges also. So small class size, we touched on that, right? And setting in areas generally not in the middle of a city, even though there are a couple of them which are located like that, but generally they're not. No sports teams, right? I mean, they're going to have sports facilities. You want to play basketball, you want to play football, you want to play soccer, whatever, of course. They have all the facilities that a large university does, but they don't participate, between those colleges. They'll be in like tier three or something, and not many people even show up to watch them. Okay, so they don't go out and recruit from high school these top athletes, which the large universities do, because they have a team that represents the university to play against other colleges, etc. And then, I would say this is important to some of you. It is an easier transition to go from high school to a liberal arts college, because it's, size wise, it's about the same size. Class sizes are even smaller than what you're used to in high school, right? So I would say it is an easier transition in that sense, right? The one thing to keep in mind, small colleges do have all the majors, right? There are other colleges do, but if you, I don't know, pick one like University of California at Davis, it may be an example, not the only one, but so they may have, three variations of chemistry, right, as a major. You have to be careful if you're looking for something like that, to make sure that with all the advantages we talked about for liberal arts colleges, they may or may not have that specific major that you're looking for, a variation of it. They will have a chemistry major, they will have economics major, they will offer you classes in econometrics, applied economics, etc. But sometimes there are some universities that actually, the bigger ones, they actually offer you a major in that, right? So that is one drawback. But if you know exactly what you want to do, and you like all the other things, other characteristics of the traits that a small college or a liberal arts college offers, then that college is for you. Okay. All right, this is just something I wanted to throw in, but this, when we meaning Uwezo does this college selection for you here, we have not put any of the small colleges, but this is just an example of another student, but there are students, who want at least 2 or 3 small colleges to be part of that. So we develop a complete plan for each student. You can look at the tabs here, the list of colleges, the essay prompts, other specific notes by college, scholarship, financial statement, etc., etc. Okay, so this is something that we do offer, obviously. So I wanted to just mention that for those of you who are interested in that. Okay, and then of course, if you want a shot at the top 30, then the only way, the best way, this is the same message as the course slide, except telling you in a different way. But you do have to stand out. That's the only way to do it. And the only way to stand out is by doing activities and showing your passion, showing compassion, etc. Because in the top 30 universities, your grades and SAT scores, etc., are assumed to be in a certain range. Now, if you talk about Ivy Leagues or Stanford or Chicago and universities like that, same criteria as I showed you in the very first slide. However, they may require an SAT score of something like a 1580 to 1600. But if you go down the chain to your top 25, top 30, they might be happy with a 1510 or a 1520, right? But there is a class of colleges, right? So if you look at the top 10 and then the 10 and then the 10, etc., right? The criteria are the same, but the way they measure you basically is you do have to stand out within that band, if you will. Okay, so the more you stand out, the better for you, and the better your chances of not only admission but also a potential scholarship, etc. Okay, I believe that might be the last slide. Oops. Yeah. Okay. Anyway, questions. I can take any questions people have, anything that I have not covered so far. No questions? Is anybody, let me ask, is anybody interested after having gone through this to consider applying to these small colleges? One or two at least. Is that a no? Only looking at big colleges? You guys are all on mute.
Hello, Raj Garu.
Yeah, Madhavi, please go ahead.
Yeah, do these colleges offer the biology, chemistry also, or only the computer science kind of
No, no,
things?
no, they offer all the majors, biology, chemistry, absolutely, yeah,
Oh, okay, okay.
yeah. And it's a good place, from here, those that want to move on to grad school or sometimes, um, medical school, or where, you have to do something beyond that, the small college atmosphere could be an advantage.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
So looks like there are a couple of them in Boston area, I guess, right?
Lot of them are in the Northeast area, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay.
A number of them. Pennsylvania and Massachusetts, some in New York also. There's actually at least 30 that are really, really good,
Mm-hmm.
right? And some of them are well known for certain things, while others are known for other things, right?
Yeah,
But as I said, the consortium makes it easy for students to take courses, because not all courses that you want may be offered in the same college. You can actually go across and take a class in the consortium, of the same colleges.
okay.
Yeah.
Another quick question. One thing which I heard was you were saying in top colleges usually professors are very busy with the research and all, and
Mm-hmm.
then the teaching is not their priority.
Right.
How does it really work with the students? I mean, we go all the way, we pay all the fee and all that stuff, and how does it work? The teaching is not the
It's
priority for the teacher.
Right. That's a good question. I'm glad you asked. And that's, I think I said that, but I'm glad you asked anyway. So what happens is, see, this is the thing, right? So that's why if you notice, none of the slides talked about ranking,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because we're not really big fans of ranking because see, ranking is done depending on what criteria are used. Okay. So if you look at the Nobel laureates, right? Where do they come from? They come from the IVs, right?
No.
I'm talking about the, like Berkeley, UCLA, Chicago for probably economics, Northwestern, etc., right? So if these people are busy doing that, where do they have the time to teach? They have no interest, but they're supposed to teach. So what they do is generally, as I said, in the first, like freshman year, as it's called, and the second year is called a sophomore year.
Hmm.
What they do is they will teach economics 101, okay, but there
Mm-hmm.
will be 500 kids in the class.
Yeah, basically it's just like
A
monologue. You don't
lecture.
have.
Yeah, it's a monologue. Absolutely, you're right. Okay. Now, what they do is that after the 500 or 400, whatever, right? So then they do break them up into class sizes of 40 or 50. But those are again taught by teaching assistants.
Hmm.
Now, from our experience and talking to all, many of the students over time, over the last 12 years, sometimes they say the TA is much better than the professor, right? Because some of
Mm-hmm.
the TAs actually want to do well and they do get rated. So they have an internal website and stuff where they rate amongst themselves the students, say which TA is good. And of course, these kids are smart. They'll also say this TA is easy, he's an easy grader, right?
Okay.
So all of
Mm-hmm.
them want to go into that class and then it gets filled up fast.
Okay.
Like in
Okay.
big universities, especially public universities, getting a course that you want is can also be a challenge,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Mm.
So there are certain, disadvantages, certain advantages. So you really have to think about, what's best for the student and then make the right decision.
Okay. Okay. It kind of sounded a little strange that teaching is not the priority,
No,
but
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely not. Absolutely not. Yeah, that's true. It's not a
Mm-hmm.
priority. In fact, I know of students that go even to talk to a TA. The TA also, the TA also is busy doing his thesis, right?
Mm-hmm.
So he also is, I mean, he'll do it. Some of them, I'm not saying they're all bad or something, but it's more of a self-preservation. So
See,
what happens is they
basically,
might say, okay, I have an hour Monday, 6 to 7 p.m. and Wednesday, 7 to 9 p.m., whatever. So what happens, 10 people go to ask questions. And then by the time the fifth person gets his or her answer, questions answered, time's up.
mhm, yes.
So many students don't even bother going.
Mm. So basically, I think the students who want to take the path of teaching, the PhD, research, they might be get little bit of advantage. But if their career path is different, not in those areas of what the professor and the TA is taking,
Mhm.
I maybe for them it is much more disadvantage.
Yeah, so, but like I said, kids tend to be resilient. So if you talk about the top 30 universities, right, I keep saying top 30 because I don't want to say ranking and all that, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
So just say top, whatever the top is, right? So generally kids learn to survive,
Oh, that is there anyways.
right? So you could say, there is a little bit more hand holding in the liberal arts colleges because of the small size and the rapport and all that. And then in the larger universities, because you don't have that, you become a more self-reliant, independent thinker, critical thinker, etc. You can always make a case for that,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
right? So it can work both ways.
Okay, okay. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
Sir, is it the same thing in all the colleges, all the universities?
You mean the professors not teaching?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, all the big ones, all the big ones.
Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, what comes to mind is especially state schools, like if you talk about UT Austin
Mm.
or University of California, Los Angeles, or Berkeley, or any of these, right? They do have highly qualified professors, but they're also very research oriented,
Okay.
right? So they're there to not necessarily teach, But of course, they have to teach a certain number of hours to keep their, job or get their pay and all that kind of stuff. But these days, what's happening, it's always happened, but now they also do a lot of consulting for industry, right? So industries will come and give them grants, and then they will do a specific research for a specific company or an industry. So that's where their time goes because that's more fun for them.
Is it the same thing in Indian colleges also?
Couldn't answer that for you because I'm not sure.
Okay.
Yeah, we don't,
Okay.
we're
Yeah.
not that familiar with Indian colleges. Yeah, but
Thank you.
outside it's the case. Yeah. Okay. All right. If nothing else, I thank you for joining, and hopefully we were able to help you out a little bit and give you some more things to think about. If you have any more questions, just get in touch with us. Okay. All right. Thanks again. Good night.